Welcome to GeeK KetchUp. I'm Kyle Eckert alongside Chris Heck. We're two lifelong friends with a passion for all things geek. Whether it's gaming, movies, television, wrestling, comics, whatever. If it's nerdy, there's a good chance we're into it. You are listening to Chapter 12 of Season 1. Today we're talking about a video game years in the making, the long-awaited Final Fantasy VII Remake. Before we get started here, Chris and I wanted to take a moment to say thank you for listening to this chapter, and thank you to everyone that's been listening. There's a lot going on in the world right now, and we appreciate you choosing to spend your time with us. Hopefully everyone is staying safe and healthy. Also, we hope that in this short time you're hanging out with us, it's a nice break from the high stress we're all experiencing. Usually this is the part where we ask you to spread the word about GeeK KetchUp on social media and to stay saucy. Instead, I'll ask you to spread the word on using common sense, smart social distancing, and to quote Braun Strowman, remember to wash those hands.
The Final Fantasy media franchise dates back to 1987 when the original science fantasy game, Final Fantasy I, was released in Japan on the Nintendo Entertainment System by developer Square Enix. Since then, the IP has received critical acclaim as 14 additional Final Fantasies and numerous spin-offs have been released over the last 33 years. Collectively, this series has become one of the best-selling video game franchises in history, with over 149 million copies sold, according to Wikipedia.
Additionally, players have seen the vibrant worlds and unique characters evolve over the decades as gaming technology has improved enough to meet the ambition of the game's developers. Final Fantasy titles have been featured on more than 20 platforms, including the NES, SNES, GameCube, PlayStations 1 through 4, Xbox 360, Xbox One, Switch, PC, and mobile. In fact, they have even been so successful that many of the series' most iconic installments have been remastered and re-released multiple times over the years to bring them into current generation consoles.
And though each Final Fantasy story is memorable enough to stand the test of time, there has been one that fans have long considered the crown jewel, Final Fantasy VII.
Released 10 years after the original, Final Fantasy VII brought the franchise into the modern age by being the first in the series to be on the Sony PlayStation. Featuring updated graphics and a campaign that spanned across multiple discs, the story's characters, setting, and events captured the hearts of gamers around the world as it won numerous Game of the Year awards and to some is still considered to be the greatest video game of all time.
Given Kyle and I's history with gaming, we were around 10 to 11 years old when Final Fantasy VII came out, and little did we know at that time how important the story would be to us and so many others all these years later.
This game really has gone down as one of the most memorable games for our group of friends and for us in general, as we've all had different genre preferences over the years, especially for first players, but it seems like everyone in our group gravitated towards Final Fantasy VII.
For sure, yeah. We've all played this, and then really we all kind of stuck around the Final Fantasy games for years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Got into 8, 9, 10, Legend of Dragoon. For me, it was really my first exposure to a JRPG game. As growing up, we didn't really play RPGs. We played a lot of sports games and fighting games, multiplayer games. There wasn't too many single-player campaigns because my brother and I were always competing over console time. But my first exposure to Cloud and the entire world of Midgard was actually through our friend Sean. So I had just gotten my PlayStation and didn't really own any games outside of like the sports games and the fighting games like I had said. And Sean owned Final Fantasy VII. I brought it over to my house one day after school, and he had been playing it for a while, so he was a little farther along into the game. He brought his memory card over as well. And at this point, like I said, I had never even heard of it, never even looked at Final Fantasy VII or any other RPGs. And so we just sat there and playing it, and I watched him play, and it all looked incredible. But honestly, the real hook for me with Final Fantasy VII was this moment where I was sitting there watching Sean play, and we heard the garage door open.
Uh-oh.
And yeah, and my mom was coming home from work. And so one thing, and hopefully this is another moment that doesn't get me grounded 20 some odd years later, but I wasn't allowed to have friends over after school without my parents being home. So we hear the garage door, and it's like an instant panic.
Oh, yeah.
Of, oh, God, Sean's not supposed to be here. we've got the PlayStation's hooked up to the TV in the living room. This is not something you can just turn off, grab, and run, because there is that fear that it's going to erase your memory card.
Yeah, you had to be real careful back then because you had the physical discs that were touchy. You had those memory cards that could be wiped at any moment. It was a scary situation.
Oh, yeah. So you couldn't just like turn everything off, grab, and go. So what ended up happening was Sean ran down the basement steps and out the back door. And meanwhile, I'm stuck in my living room playing this game that I had no idea how to play, but I had to sell it to my mom when she walked in the door that I knew what I was doing. Because I'm thinking, okay, well, she doesn't pay attention to what I play exactly. But, like, she does, but she's not going to totally recognize this game as a game that I don't own.
Or a game that she bought you.
Or a game that she bought me, yeah. Like, she doesn't, she knows what I play as far as the sports games and the fighting games, and she sees it, but I don't think she would be able to actually say, like, I've never seen you play this before. Or maybe she could have, but who knows. Sean runs out, and I'm stuck playing the game, and it's actually a moment where he's flying around in the high wind, and he's just kind of cruising around the entire landscape. So I get my hands on the controller and I start flying the high wind around. And it just instantly clicked. Like the first time, it just felt so natural. And of course, then I get pulled into a battle and I'm figuring out how to play the game with the pressure of my mom being in the kitchen. And she can't be like, why are you so bad at this? So I played it and I like instantly got hooked to the game. Within a week, I was at Best Buy spending what was left of my allowance to buy Final Fantasy VII.
That's awesome.
I'll throw in a quick side note. I didn't have a memory card because we were so new to having a PlayStation. And like I said, we mostly played sports games, which you don't necessarily need a memory card to play a sports game. You can just plug it in and play. So without a memory card, I had to play the opening for like the whole first month I owned the game. I just kept playing the opening sequence of the game. And every now and then I would just leave my PlayStation running and it would run for like 48 hours at a time just so I didn't have to play the opening again.
Just see how far you could get in it.
Yeah, eventually I did get a memory card and played the rest of the game though.
I think eventually you had more memory cards than any of us.
Yeah. Oh, I had a whole collection. I think at one point I had close to like 6 or 7 memory cards plus a Game Shark that was 8 in one. It was a little much.
Yeah, but you needed them back then.
It's true.
For me, I will say that while Final Fantasy VII was the first one that I explicitly remember playing start to finish myself, my history with Final Fantasy goes back a little further and started because of my grandfather. So Pappy was ahead of his time. He was always interested in computers and technology, and that led him really to being an early adopter of game consoles in the 1980s, and he quickly found a love for RPG titles like Legend of Zelda, Breath of Fire, and Final Fantasy. So I can remember, even before really getting into playing video games myself, I can remember being at his house and watching him play as these odd little wizards walking around, talking to people. I remember getting captivated by the battle scenes because, as a young kid, it's pretty much just seeing something shoot fireballs and, healing green animations when he's trying to save his team. So for me, being 6 to 8 years old at that point, probably, it was like watching cartoons.
Yeah, very visually stimulating.
Exactly, visually stimulating, and it got me hooked ever since. So, from there, kind of what you alluded to, I can remember our group of friends all getting into FF7, and it really wasn't too long after that before we had all beaten it. Sometimes that was on our own, other times it was while hanging out or having sleepovers where we would literally take turns playing on each of our individual memory cards.
Yeah.
So Kyle would play for an hour or two, and then we jump over to my game or we jump over to Sean's game. And, really back then, playing RPGs like this was essentially a community act.
Oh, yeah.
Because you didn't have the internet to go run to and watch YouTube videos or get the answers on how to get past a tough spot. You had strategy guides back then, but whether or not as a kid you had the extra money to get one or your parents were going to buy you one, or even if the store had them for that specific game, those were all issues.
Well, and strategy guides only take you so far. Like, it's very different than a video walkthrough that you get today where you can actually see what actions the player takes and then replicate that on your own game. The strategy guide just gives you tips.
Yeah.
And this is what you should do, but actually executing and doing it was all up to you. You couldn't mimic what someone else was doing.
Exactly. So, like, our version of YouTube videos back then literally was your friend sitting next to you while hanging out, watching you play.
Yeah.
And then if they had already beaten it, if you had struggled, then maybe they would share with you how they did it or give you some hints. Other times, maybe if we were going through it together completely blind, then we would sit there and figure it out together. But it essentially just created these bonds between
Oh,
us
yeah.
over these specific games. I'm also thinking like Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and some other ones that were right there in the mid to late 90s where we were just at that age where this is what we were doing. And who knows, some of us may not have beaten it
Yeah.
at that time if we didn't have each other. So flashing forward 20 years later, to this day, I've played every major Final Fantasy title, and I've even literally, this shows how much of a nerd I am, but I've even grown to love the FF7 franchise so much that I actually have a Cloud Strife tattoo on my arm where he's riding a Yoshi like it's a chocobo.
And it's badass.
Thank you.
This does bring us to today, April 11th, 2020, and it's a big moment for us all as we've finally gotten our hands on something we've been waiting years for, something that takes the Final Fantasy franchise in a new direction, the complete remake of Final Fantasy VII. Once again, it was brought to us by Square Enix, and the remake of this iconic game promises to be an episodic expansion of the story gamers have cherished for 23 years.
Featuring current-gen graphics, improved combat, and a campaign that takes a deeper look at the Midgar environment of the original, the game promises to immerse players further in the world of Cloud, Barret, and Aeris than they've ever been. The remake released April 10th on PS4, and Kyle and I spent most of our day and night soaking it all in. Neither of us have beaten the game yet, but we're here to share with you our initial thoughts using the official GeeK KetchUp rating system. Consider it our review in progress, if you will. Using the 5 categories of gameplay, graphics and sounds, technical performance, story, and sauciness, we will be assigning up to 1 star for each category with a maximum possible rating of 5 stars.
Before we do, if you aren't familiar with the events of the 20-plus-year-old game, then here is your spoiler warning. Otherwise, let's jump into this.
In our breakdown here, let's first start out by taking a look at the story, Kyle. Of course, the Final Fantasy VII story from all those years ago has been absolutely iconic. It has led to spin-offs and movies and fan theories and all sorts of stuff. Everybody knows what's going on there. So we're not necessarily going to jump into all of the individual events that happened in the original game and may even be happening here. But we want to take a look at how the remake is approaching the story, maybe how things are a little different, how things are similar, and what we're thinking about it so far. So I'll just jump in right here, Kyle. I will say Midgar is definitely brought to life in the opening sequence like we've never seen before. It was really cool as it's coming in. The game just started, and it's taking you through the peaceful streets.
Yep.
Kids are riding bikes. It's very everyday feel.
Yeah, a very everyday feel. And the total recreation of that opening cinematic just totally sets the tone as far as the story and where we're going and where we're headed. But you're right, the feel that they give to Midgar in that opening sequence, that it's a busy city with a lot of people, whether it's in New York or Paris or London. You know, it's a major city, millions of people all relying on this one, because I feel like they highlight the reactor, the Shinra Corporation reactor, really well there in that opening cinematic, being like, yes, this is a full-blown city, a lot going on, and it all relies on this one major power source in the middle.
Exactly, yeah. And I thought really almost immediately after you get to see that and everything on the surface is looking calm and peaceful, then you jump right in. The iconic start of the original game, this was one thing they did keep very similar, but you go straight in with the team as Cloud to attack the Mako reactor. You got to drop that bomb. And what I thought was really cool was how all of that was so similar.
Yeah.
You know, it was almost piece for piece what we got in the original game. But then the second you get out of the reactor, I really thought this is where Square did an amazing job, both upping the ante for what is going on at this moment, but also for shifting the perspectives. Because, you know, in the original game, you pretty much hit the reactor and then you're gone.
Yeah.
But here, as soon as you come out of the reactor, you go right back to those same city streets.
Yeah.
Where all those peaceful kids were riding bikes and everybody was hanging out. and it is chaos, right? Explosions, fire, crying, pain. You see all of those things coming out from the people. So I thought it was really cool just to immediately, okay, here's what you know. Now, boom, let's look at it from a different perspective.
It was pretty cool, and you're right. Like thinking back on it, I didn't think about the original and how you hit the reactor and then you run away. But you're 100% right. You hit the city streets and you see the immediate impact that the Avalanche group has had on that surrounding area, and it really makes you. They kind of get into this a little later, but it really makes you think: are we doing the right thing? Because while the whole gist of Avalanche is to take down this evil corporation of Shinra, but in doing so, you're impacting a lot of everyday people's lives.
Yeah.
And a lot of destruction. You're going to kill some innocents. Like,
Right.
people are going to die because of the actions, whether you think you're right or you're wrong. And so it shifts the perspective and the tone of the story and the series and what you're doing as Avalanche and Cloud and the whole crew.
Yeah, for sure. It just immediately made me think, not too many miles from my house here in Charlotte, we have a nuclear power reactor. And that's essentially, when we say the Mako reactor, that's essentially what this would be, is kind of the equivalent. Everybody needs it to have the heat, have air conditioning, to power their electronics. And so I was like, yeah, I mean, if somebody just came and took down and blew up, the nuclear power plant here in Charlotte, we'd be lights out. It would be chaos here for a number of at least days, weeks minimum, right? So it kind of just made it a little bit more real. And on that level, I thought, one of the other things that was really interesting, and I don't know if you thought about this, but to me, seeing the story unfold in this way, especially the layer deeper that it's going, it really got me thinking about how ahead of the times this game was back in 1997, because the motivations of Avalanche are eco-based. Barrett and them are very concerned about what Shinra and the Mako reactors are doing to the environment, or doing to the planet.
Right.
And while there definitely was people talking about, climate impacts and global warming and things like that back in the 90s, it wasn't as popular or as hot of a topic, however you want to say it, as it is today in 2020. So it immediately made me think, like, man, Square was way ahead of their time 23 years ago. But now that you're bringing it to life and taking it deeper, it still fits.
Yeah.
And is almost even more applicable to 2020. I don't know what your thoughts are there.
Oh, I definitely caught that. There was a moment where you're walking through when you first go to the slums, and they talk about the division between the people that live on the plate and then the people that live on the ground floor. And Tifa kind of references it a few times, like life on the ground floor and like this and that. And I'm like, wow, this game is really talking, like taking on some social issues. And for being a game that is 20 plus years old, it's pretty woke.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just the characters being that much more alive, and I'm sure we'll get into some of that a little bit later, but it just, everything that they're doing here brings it that much more to the forefront, and it really just gave me a reason to look at this story that I'm so familiar with in a different light.
Yeah.
And if that was their intention, then bravo to Square and the developers that worked on this, because I never would have thought that I would have gotten such a different view on this story after, having already played through it numerous times over the years.
Yeah, and I would say each playthrough, like you compare it to what we experienced as 11, 12-year-olds and now what we're experiencing as 30-year-olds, our mindset has changed. We're more aware of what's going on around us and in society.
That's very true.
It speaks to that a little bit, where some of the game back in 1997 was definitely going to be over our heads, and we just weren't going to understand. But now, I'm 34 years old. I've seen some things. I've lived through some things. A little more hip to what's going on around me than I was when I was 12. So I'm seeing, like, wow, this story is deep and really reflective of what we see in society.
Yep, I totally agree. So what have your thoughts been as far as, because it seemed like we've gotten a lot more cut scenes, or essentially, little movie scenes in between the action of when you're playing, than what we got in the original game, especially because with new technology, new graphics engines, the cutscenes are much more elaborate. They're much more laid out versus maybe what they were doing back on a 16-bit, 32-bit system. So, what have you thought about some of the cutscenes we saw early on as we were really just getting into the game here?
Oh, they've been magnificent, and it's equal parts. This entire experience of playing it day one has been equal parts of just memories and feelings hitting you from the past, and then also just impressing you with the performance of the game in itself and what they've been able to revitalize. So I've been really impressed with the cutscenes and a lot of little things like that we maybe were instants. We look at like when Cloud's on the train or riding along on the train back to the slums, or walking through the carnage after the Mako reactor has exploded and the town is in chaos. It's things in the original game that were just quick blips, like a flash of light, and he stands there with his hands on his head. Those moments, they've taken the liberty of expanding them out and making full cutscenes and showing you the memories and the internal distress that Cloud is having, and that's just been top notch. It's been so cool to not only expand on what's there, but to give you a deeper dive into this character that you felt like you knew through and throughout.
Yeah, I totally agree. I started to think about how when I first started playing, it was odd because I was watching some of these cutscenes, the items with Sephiroth and some of the things from Cloud's past being brought right there to the forefront. And I was racking my brain going, this feels familiar, but it feels different. Was this part of the original game? Was it not? And I think ultimately where I landed was that some of these cutscenes we're seeing in the remake are full visualizations of what were probably just little text blurbs
Yeah.
in the original game. Like you mentioned, the little white flash you'd see on the screen in the original game, and maybe Cloud would do some little motion to show that he's under distress. But if you got any information at all, it would just be a little couple sentence text block that would pop up, because that was how 90% of the original game was.
Oh yeah, any inner monologue type stuff would always come in. Like there's the regular. I'm thinking of the original. There's the text box that has the blue background.
Yep.
And then sometimes you would get text that was just text, and it was always white, and it didn't have a box around it. It was just free form text, and it was always that internal monologue or inner monologue of Clouds. So they took those moments, like you said, there was only one or two sentences or maybe a couple words, and they've turned them into full-on cutscenes.
Yeah, it's just making it so much more immersive, granting so much more understanding of these characters. And
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the figure of speech, peeling back the layers of the onion is super applicable here.
Yeah, oh yeah.
As we probably get close here to wrapping up our items on the story, I think one thing that we should call out for folks, especially if you're not aware or haven't been following this game up to its release quite as closely as we have, is that the game is actually set up to be delivered in episodes.
Right.
So Sony and Square Enix came out back when they announced this game, and we had all this discussion over what the term episodic was going to mean for a game this big, right? A game that we're already so familiar with. So really, probably the big thing to call out for this is just that this is essentially part one of the Final Fantasy VII Remake saga that we're going to get. So it's only going to take you so far in the story. And I don't necessarily think, now that I've played it, that it's quite as big of a negative as what we were originally speculating. I know we had lots of discussion over what this was going to turn into.
We didn't know what the end number was going to be.
Right.
Like they've said it's going to be episodic, but we don't know if was that 1, 2, 5? Like how many episodes are we going to get? It was 3
Exactly.
discs in the beginning, but at this point where I am 10 hours or so into the game, if in the original, I would have been way beyond where I am storyline wise.
Yeah, very true. We would have definitely moved beyond Midgar, and that is the point, right? Is that with this, they are highlighting all the events that happened to these characters at the beginning of the game and really just blown it up, expanded it beyond what I think we ever would have expected we'd see out of something that was originally released so long ago. I have to say, and really one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up, because I was a big voice saying, what in the hell are they doing making this into episodes, right?
Sure.
Was it a money grab? Was it just because of the time? How long is the game going to be? Because you think episodes, you think Telltale games.
Right.
That are short, kind of concise, whatever it may be. So I was one of those people, but I have to admit that, I'm roughly 8 to 10 hours into, just like yourself, and most of that time I have completely forgot about the fact that it's episodic. Like, I've had to remind myself that it is going to be delivered in chunks because it's just been so good.
It really has. It's given you time to spend characters that we didn't spend that much time with the first go around. And looking at Biggs and Wedge and Jesse, those were characters that were the total definition of side characters.
Right.
Throwaway NPCs. You spent maybe like the first hour or so with them. And now here you go on full blown missions with them. And they're not side characters in a sense where you can take control of them the way you can Barrett and Tifa, but they're there supporting you and attacking other enemies along with you. So it's nice to see them expand that out and give more depth. And it's going to add more to this experience to make you forget that we're only going to get so far in the larger story.
Yeah, it definitely has turned from me being concerned that this was a money grab. And they're going to take a bunch of money from all of us, right? We're going to buy a few of these games and they're going to have premium price tags. But when they're giving us so much back and so much more that we can then take and love for years to come, I think that they're really delivering a value back to the consumer with this story.
Yeah, and you wouldn't expect anything less from Square. They've produced quality titles for years, so it's nice to see them giving you, not just taking your money and running away with it. Like, no, this is something that everyone's wanted for a really long time. It's such a cherished game, so many memories for so many different people, and they want to deliver, and so far they have.
Completely. So, wrapping up the story section of our rating system here, Kyle, out of 1 star, what did you rate the story so far?
So, it's going to be a little harsh. It's going to sound like, how in the world can you do this, given everything you just said? But I'm actually going to give it a half star.
Really?
I'm giving it a half star because it's a little slow.
Okay.
And I think maybe in the long run, it'll get this half star back. So I fully anticipate that this is a review in progress. And as I get farther in the game, the story is going to end up with that full star. But for right now, it was a little slow. While I did enjoy the backstory on Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, it's kind of like a situation of why. I want to get to my core team faster.
Sure.
That was a big complaint. I'm not sure how I feel about this love story between Cloud and Jesse. I don't know. It's already, given what we know about the original game and the love triangle that happens, I don't need a fourth person into this love.
Well, I don't know if you picked it up, but it's not even just a love story between Cloud and Jesse. It seems to be a love story between everybody in Cloud.
Yeah, right?
Because you've got the aspect with Tifa and whatnot that we know from the original. You've got this new stuff that they're introducing pretty on the nose with Jesse.
Oh, yeah.
And then I even found when I was just going around talking to NPCs, there's these 2 Shinra soldiers that are guarding a section of the map that you can't get into. And it kind of cracked me up because when you go to talk to them, there's like a newbie and then there's a commander. And the newbie keeps struggling. Like he doesn't have the confidence to tell Cloud, like, you can't go in here. And then the commander just keeps yelling at him. And every time you press triangle, the dialogue kept changing. So I just kept making him go through it for no real reason.
Yeah.
But just to help make your point, at the end of all that, the newbie recruit was so into Cloud that he asked him on a date. So you got NPCs, you got side characters, you've got main characters. Everybody is sweating Cloud.
Right. Everybody wants it's something about that hair.
It has to be. In the eyes?
In the eyes, yeah, the green eyes and the blonde hair.
Good looking dude.
Yeah, good looking. It's he's got the sleeveless turtleneck on, so the guns are showing. Or maybe it's just that gigantic sword he's walking around with.
Yeah, hopefully he's not compensating, because then all those girls are going to be really, really disappointed.
Yeah, well, he's Mako enhanced, so I'm sure he's fine.
It's true. It's true. A half star, I can't argue with you there just because simply you are right. There are some moments here at the beginning of the game that were a little bit slow, and that could definitely take it down. I see that. I went with a 1-star rating simply because I was so enamored with just taking what I knew about this story and just continuously digging into it deeper, giving me more and more. I'm expecting this pretty much start to finish now,
yeah.
As I move through the rest of the game. And so that really impressed me. I kind of saw some things that I wasn't expecting them to do so much with, so I gave it 1 star.
And that's fair. Like I said, when it all's said and done, I expect this to be a full star. But to be honest, in those first 10 hours that I've played, it's getting a half.
Okay, totally fair. So with that, we'll move over and take a look at the gameplay. And I know we kind of touched on a few of these things, but let's go into it a little bit deeper. Really thinking about things like the combat, moving around in a little bit more of an open world, some of those kinds of things. So what did you have about the gameplay here?
Oh, the combat is totally unique, and I'm just really digging it. It is equal parts RPG, JRPG, and hack and slash. And I love the pause menu to execute spells and abilities. I think that's a really awesome take. The guarding is something that takes some getting used to, and the camera work is something that takes getting used to. But I feel like once I got it down, once I got the flow and the fluidity of a combat down and fighting something, I just couldn't get enough of it. I just want all I'm really waiting for is an arena that just throws enemy after enemy after enemy at me so I can just keep demolishing things. I just thought it was just so smooth. It felt great.
Yeah, I totally agree. I gotta hear that it's fast but thoughtful combat. Because you can play somewhat as a button masher, but it's not really the best approach just because
No.
you still have a lot of classic Final Fantasy elements here with the magic, with the status effects, things that the enemies can do to you to make sure that you can't attack at that time. So you do really need to take a step back, be a little bit more thoughtful about your attacks, and then when you're going to pull those commands. Especially given how, with the combat, you can't just drop magic or potions or abilities at any moment.
Right.
You have to attack with your basic attacks, build up your gauge, and then from there you can tell Cloud to go and do a big hit or Barrett to drop lightning. And, so you're constantly watching those things. And if you're just in there hack and slashing, you're not really going to get the most out of it because you're not going to pay enough attention. So I thought that they did a really good job there for how much is going on with those things and the fact that you can have a party of up to 3 people going at the same time. I thought that they also did the controls pretty good.
Yeah.
The quick commands with the triggers and how it slows the game down, gives you plenty of time to comfortably find that ability and tell that character to go do something on your behalf. And then really just the quick D-pad, right? The instant switching. If you want to go from Cloud to Tifa, go from sword use to hand-to-hand combat and start beating some ass, you can do that too. So I thought they did a pretty good job. I wanted to ask you, because I know we've talked in the past that you weren't the biggest fan of the combat in Final Fantasy 15.
Right.
Which was more of this live action style. So how did your thoughts on Final Fantasy 15 compare to what you've thought about Final Fantasy 7 Remake so far?
So the big difference between 15 and the 7 remake for me is that strategic pause menu. And that has boosted the combat for me because in 15, without that, it just felt like a hack and slash.
Sure.
And for somebody that I've played a lot of God of War, and I really like hack and slash games like Dynasty Warriors and things like that, I dig those games. It was easy for me to just slip into the hack and slash mode with 15, where I was just boom, 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 and I never even touched the spells, or I'd forget to call in my teammates to do bigger damage and stuff like that. And so I never fully got comfortable with it, versus with the remake here, seeing that bar fill up and making me hit the command menu and making me take the strategic pause has really let me utilize the full suite of abilities.
Sure, yep.
So it's that slight change has made a world of difference for me in playing the game.
I definitely agree. I would like to see some of this stuff get worked into Final Fantasy 16 and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to stay in this realm of a more live action styling, I think that maybe they might have found a sweet spot as far as that balance, right?
Yeah, I'd agree, because 15 ended up feeling, and it's been a while since I played it, so I'll admit that, but what I remember the most is that I would just hold circle and just attack, 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 every now and then step out, heal myself, and then just go back in, attack, 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 attack. And that never felt like what Final Fantasy games were about. They were meant to be strategy games at their core.
That's true. The other thing I have to say when it kind of comes to the team and the combat was I've really appreciated what we've seen so far and kind of the new approach they've made to character and weapon customization.
Ooh, the weapons tree. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like almost every aspect of that is that much deeper, that much more unique than it was in the past, and really making some decisions on how you want to play first and foremost. And then they give you that freedom to meet it. You know, when you go into the weapons trees, you're seeing some of those weapons are built more towards magical buffs, others are more physical damage. You can easily customize materia with the different spells. Do you want to be a healer? Do you want to have all the magic? You know, some of those, it's all elements that we're very familiar with from Final Fantasy, but I think that they kind of dropped them in a slightly different way that really, instead of those characters being kind of locked into some of those roles,
Yeah.
if you want to make Tifa essentially your mage, you can do that. And if you want to make Cloud your healer, you could do that, right?
Yeah.
You can kind of put it together however you really want.
And I do like that kind of slight tweak. It gives you some customizable options for each character and also allows you to pick your main.
Right.
Like I don't know why you wouldn't want to be Cloud all the time, but in case you don't and you want to rock Barrett as your main, you can.
Yeah, you could definitely do that. And they also kind of went with an interesting choice for the way summoning works.
Yeah.
In the past, you could almost have numerous summons, and it changes Final Fantasy. That's probably the tough part, right? Is every Final Fantasy is slightly unique in how the progression and customization things work, the mechanics. But in this one, with summons, instead of one character like a Cloud having 5, 6 summons at their disposal that you could call in at any time, you have to essentially choose one summon to be attached to each character in your party.
Right.
I was thinking, and it hasn't been so much up front yet that we've had to do this, but I was thinking down the road, right, later in the game, I'm probably going to have to make some more strategic decisions on which summons I take into certain battles.
Oh, yeah. I've thought about that a few times where as this game progresses and we get more weapons and the trees expand out, are we going to be looking at more customization per battle? We're really going to have to go in, okay, I fight this enemy one time, I'm struggling with it, but I know that it's weak to ice. And so you start to attach Blizzard or, your ice attacks more often. I could very easily see this game taking that direction and building it out and making sure that you're prepped uniquely for each battle.
Yep, for sure. So what were some of the things that you had written down from the gameplay perspective?
Solid stuff I like from the gameplay. I like the sword play. Really like Barrett more than I thought I would. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel, like how would a range character work in this environment. And I did play the demo eventually, and I could say, like, in that first demo taste, I didn't like Barrett all that much, but now that I've gotten more used to him and used him to fight, so that first boss, that Scorpion Warden, the Scorpion mech, really found myself utilizing Barrett as my main there.
Okay, that's interesting.
Which, because it's a larger enemy, and it was sometimes like when you're Cloud or Tifa and you're up underneath of it and you can't see what everything that's happening because of the camera range. So it was nice to use Barrett to pull back and be able to see everything that's going on and allowing Cloud to do his thing in the melee and, keep some distance and allows you to dodge a little easier, I think, for me.
That's true. And in some of those, like that fight there, you also kind of need that because you need to be able to heal.
Yeah.
In order, that's a tough fight early on in the game, and having that ability to keep eye on the health and not be so focused on trying to just attack, like you said, that's a very good point.
Is there anything that stood out on your end? I mean, is there any characters that stand out that you really like being?
I've really enjoyed being Tifa, actually. I mean, I've mained Cloud so far just because he is the main character and he is so strong
and lovable,
right? But really, when I got to Tifa, I was most interested in her because we didn't get to play as her in the demo, and she's got that hand-to-hand boxing style combat. And I really feel like when you get going with her, doing the big uppercuts and everything, the combos, that it feels like you're just beating their ass.
Oh, yeah.
Just like, she is a beast. Even though she's got that sexy skirt on and all that, she looks like a fragile woman. I mean, she is a monster. She could take Ronda Rousey out in a heartbeat.
Right. Just double tap it. Pop, pop.
So I've really enjoyed playing with Tifa, but I've been kind of bouncing back and forth. I will say I had a couple other notes here about a few things that were both positive and negatives that kind of just fit into the gameplay arena here. So I don't know how you felt about the triangle button for opening stuff and talking to people, but I think that that's been like the most clunky mechanic in the game so far. Like, am I close enough? Am I not close enough? Am I hitting it? That's been a little bit annoying to me. So it's just a little bit of a tweak on the gameplay, more of a personal preference, I guess.
I could see that. I definitely see that. Luckily, it hasn't factored in. Like, there hasn't been a time sensitive situation. Because I agree with you, it's a little clunky, but so far it's been like, oh, I'll walk over, open this chest. But if you're ever in a pressure situation where you're going to have to do it, it could cause some frustration.
Yeah, I feel like just for me in games these days, if I'm close to something, I just want it to register. I don't like when you have to like find this sweet spot, 1.4 feet away from the item, and if you go just too close to it, you can't hit it. If you back up, now you're too far. Like I just don't like getting into that, and it's not something that's unique to this game. Other games run into that all the time.
Looking at you, Red Dead.
Definitely looking at you, Red Dead. Jeez, Arthur Morgan is frustrated in that game. But on the same kind of note, one other thing that I thought was actually really nice was, and I really appreciate, was the ability to quickly return to the quest giver once you complete the mission.
Oh my god, yeah.
And it's not even like super necessary in this game because the map isn't super expansive like it would be in Red Dead Redemption, where you can travel for 10 minutes before getting to your destination.
Right.
But either way, I appreciate that in games no matter what. You do your quest, you knock it out, and then boom, if you want to, you can go straight back to the quest giver and turn it in, get your rewards.
I do like that. That's actually something that I said out loud, but then didn't write down as far as my show notes. So, my bad on that one. But you're right. You're 100% right. That is so amazing. Like, because it just makes for quick cash-ins on your quests, which in a game like this, where if it's going to give you a bunch of side quests, that's what you want. You don't want to have to like, oh, I got to go here, to go there, to go back to here.
Yeah.
Like, it just speeds that whole process up.
It's a good quality of life add for any game.
Before we move off gameplay, there was a specific sequence that I wanted to see if it gave you the feels the way it gave me the feels, and that was the motorcycle scene.
Oh my god, yeah. Yeah. I had two things left here on my list to cover for gameplay, and that was one of them, so I'm glad you brought it up. It was awesome. It was exhilarating. It was fast. It was fun. It was tough. Kind of paid homage to the classic bike scene with Cloud from the first game that everybody remembers, right?
Right.
But you never got to drive.
Yeah, you never got to do. Yeah, just had to swipe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that scene was spot on. It was so good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. The whole battle with Roche and that character was really cool. Lots of good visuals, lots of good combat.
Yeah.
And it was a longer sequence than I expected. That was a nice chunk of gameplay from start to finish in that mission.
Yeah, I mean, it was a full mission where you got some regular enemies, and then you got a big baddie that was a little more difficult, and you really had to utilize all of the different attack styles that you had. Because you've got, like, your regular swipe left, swipe right, but then there's also the spin attack and the distance attack and blocking. It really brought that whole motorcycle sequence to life.
For sure. Yeah, now the last thing I had here on gameplay, just because I thought it was kind of funny, plus I figured I would give everybody a little bit of a pro tip here, but I actually spent like a damn hour in 7th Heaven playing darts, the darts minigame.
Yeah.
And so it forces you to essentially do it while you're waiting to kill some time and for some other NPCs to come back. And there's a challenge, there's a leaderboard, playing classic darts,
Yep.
trying to count down the 300 in as little darts as possible. And I just knew as soon as I started it, I was just like, man, there's going to be an achievement for getting top of the leaderboard. So I just sat there for like an hour throwing darts over and over and over again until I finally beat Wedge's high score. And I will say, just for anybody out there, if you haven't gotten to it or you didn't do this, there absolutely is an achievement for beating Wedge on the dartboard score. And he gives you a special luck materia.
Ooh, and materia. It's so coveted.
Oh, no. You gotta have
Gotta
all
get
of them.
it. Gotta get it. Yeah, gotta collect them all. Gotta collect them all. I mean, that does bring us to the materia, and that's had a solid look and a solid feel. It's not something that we talked about in the story portion, but that look of the materia and when you get it has been super cool.
It's been brought to life more. Instead of just like a little colored, bouncy ball looking object, it's actually got swirling moving lines. It's almost like it's living and breathing. It
Yeah.
kind of looks like a witch's magic ball with the clouds kind of going around inside, right?
Yeah, it's true. It does, but that's very representative of what materia is and what it can do for you and boost your character.
Exactly. Since you brought it up, I actually kind of geeked out a ton just simply seeing the materia that you change out here and there because they're different colors. You get bright greens, bright reds, bright yellows, purples, whatever. And now, because of the definition that we're getting on the characters, when you change that on Cloud's sword, you see them.
Yeah, the little dots.
Or in Tifa's gloves, you'll see them on her wrist. And I actually geeked out a lot on that just because it was one of those tiny little details, but it just took it to another level.
Yeah.
Given how much we know about these things, how much time we've spent using them over the years in games. So there was a ton there that I thought really added up to what has been pretty solid gameplay so far. I had it rated in as a 1 star. What about you?
I had it in as a 1 as well. Despite all the clunkiness that it took me to get used to up front, that's on me. That's not on the game. So in the end, once I got comfortable and started flying, it was a 1. Knocked it out of the park.
For sure. All right, so that takes us over to graphics and sound. So, essentially the look, the feel, how it's immersing you into this world. And as you can probably tell from what we've been talking about so far, most of that has been pretty top notch. And honestly, from a graphics and sounds perspective, it did not disappoint at all. They are superb. And one thing to call out here is that with Final Fantasy games, they've always been somewhat cutting edge and forward thinking when it comes to graphics, right? But you would have these two different situations. So like when you would play, you would have graphics content that was very similar to the console of that time, right?
Right.
16-bit, 32-bit, even 8-bit going back to NES. But then they would have these cutscenes, especially from the time of Final Fantasy VII on, from the PlayStation and the Xbox generation on. They have these cutscenes that would be graphics well beyond what we would see in any other game, any other animated movie. I mean, they were always pushing the limits on graphics. So I think that they kind of hit that here, but it's almost like playing the whole game as a cutscene. What do you think?
Yeah, it's just everything about the graphics when you first get into those slums and you look back up at Midgar and it just blows your mind. I kept pausing. I'd say like there was a few times in the first couple hours where I just kept stopping and basically taking myself into photo mode and looking around because I was just so stunned. Like it's just incredible, absolutely stunning to look at in all of the details, and like you said, it feels like one long cutscene.
Yep.
From what we remember.
Well, and to your point in that moment, because I know what you're talking about, I did the same thing, right? You kind of like in awe of what you're seeing with Midgar. It really upped the scale.
Yeah.
The size and scale of Midgar in this giant city, like Kyle, you said it earlier, they call it the plate in the slums down below, but you just have this city. It's like 300 feet rising up in the air, and then underneath you have a whole nother city of essentially the poor folk that are, not allowed up there or can't afford to be up there. But the scale was massive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it was huge. Well, it gave you a sense of Midgar as an entire city. Like we said, there's millions of people live here.
Yep.
And there's 8 sections to the city, and you got to imagine there's probably like 1 million people per section, both on the plate level and down on the ground floor. Like it just, yeah, you're right. It gives you that full experience and very immersive of giving you the feel that you're just one individual in this larger space.
Right. Yeah, I was talking to our buddy Alexander, and he shared some thoughts on, because he's been playing the game as well. And so he said, quote, graphics, especially the lighting, are some of the best I've ever seen on PS4. Walking through the train cars look great, and the atmosphere of the environments are beautiful. Seeing the reactor in the distance and showing you the sky, which you never saw in the original game, gives you a real sense of how oppressive this world is. Even Alex was thinking about that same scene, looking up on the plate, so it was pretty cool.
I didn't even think about the sky. The sky and the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Man, when we get to the top and take a look at Cosmo Canyon.
Ooh, Cosmo Canyon. Getting a little ahead of yourself, but that,
yeah.
It's
yeah.
true. It's true.
It's going to just be, for me, graphically, like, There were so many moments, and I'll admit right here, and you can kind of poke some fun at me because we talked about you crying at WrestleMania, at the start of WrestleMania, in our wrestling recap, but I legitimately welled up a few times in the opening hours of this game because it were these moments, like I said, where you're looking at something and you so distinctly remember that scene or what that looked like in the original when you were a kid, and to see it come like full scale.
Oh yeah.
And it was just these moments where like I was like, man, this is just taking me back and like really, really hitting you in the feels.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I went that far as to well up in this situation, but I definitely had a few moments where I got full body goosebumps,
Yeah.
and you get all of that going, and it's just evoking so much emotion. I mean, we've put so much time into playing this game, into talking about this game, into getting tattoos about this game. Everything it just adds up to 23 years, and now we're seeing it in just such a new light and such a new glory that's what's going to happen. It's going to take you to that next level if you care about this the way that we do. And I thought that really when it comes to graphics and sounds, one of the main points I actually put down here beyond, it wasn't even so much about the environment, it was the voice acting and the character design. I almost want to say that they are perfect. I mean, they took every one of those characters, whether it's a side character or main character, and the level of detail that they put into their look, their outfits, their personalities, the voicing of who's actually acting them, all of it feels spot on. And really, it's providing a payoff to us that I don't think we ever knew we needed.
Yeah.
But everything is just now more unique, more defined, and more elevated.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree there. Like, it's in the original game with everything being text, you never actually, you kind of made up the character's voice in your head.
Right, yep.
But now that it's been remade, you're like, how in the world did they know what that voice was sounded like in my head? Because they've nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, every character, like Barrett's got that deep, bassy sound to him. And then even when he's yelling at Cloud, like, to do the job, we paid you to do the job. And you're like, whoa, like it's exactly his tone, his personality, like you said, it all is just spot on.
And we'd be remiss, I think the last thing I have here as far as graphics and sounds, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the score.
Oh my god.
Because music and the musical score is a huge part of all Final Fantasy games. They get big artists from Japan that come in and do some of the songs. They have full symphonies that are doing these orchestra scores. And I really thought that not only was all of that here as expected, but they did a great job of shifting between those subtle orchestra scores and then the high BPM music for battles.
Yeah. And then also when you like walk into the item shop.
Oh yeah.
And it kind of gives you that like slight, 32-bit sound. I don't know what the sound capabilities were on a PlayStation 1. But you know what I'm saying there, like that it's got that old retro.
Yeah, the item shop it's actually the Prelude.
Yeah, the
That's
Prelude,
the title of that. But you reminded me, like different shops throughout the area or different locations on the map have different music specific to them. So as you're running around, you're actually getting to experience all the different iconic songs at different times and in different ways.
Yeah.
It was smart.
And the little jukebox disc collection things, that's a nice touch to kind of give you that feel as well, the different scores and themes throughout the game. But yeah, you knew the score was going to crush it. You knew it was going to knock it out of the park. And from the title screen to the do 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 like that,
oh yeah,
instantly got you. The motorcycle sounds, the fight, like you said, the fight sequence, every single score is just like a nice twist. It's not exactly what it was in 1997, but it's been updated and modernized, and just it's amazing.
It's fitting. Yeah, every detail they scrutinized, it seems, and they seem to pull it off. So for gameplay and sound here, Kyle, how did you rate it?
Gave it a 1.
Can't argue. Totally gave it a 1 star myself as well.
Yeah.
Seemed like a no-brainer on that one.
It was a no-brainer. It was a no-brainer. It's going to get a 1. It's going to get a 1.
All right, so we got 2 more here, and then we're going to wrap up for the day so we can get back over to playing more Final Fantasy VII Remake. But our next category here, Kyle, is technical performance. And we are both playing on original run PS4s. Neither of us have a PS4 Pro.
Right.
Of course, this game is not on Xbox yet, so when we're talking about technical performance, we are talking about how it's running on a first run PS4. So, how's it been going for you, Kyle? Have you seen any issues or concerns?
No, this is actually, as far as our rating system goes, I was trying to find something that had gone wrong for me, but as far as I've played, it's been smooth transitions. I haven't had any glitches. I saw a couple online, like when I was on Twitter, I saw some people posting some funny gifs of like tables glitching themselves around the characters as you run around. Or like
Okay.
a table's like on their head. I saw a couple little glitches like that, and but I was like, no, I haven't experienced any of that. Everything's been silky smooth and transitions from one area to the next. No real hiccups. Like when there has been a load time on a save or a file boot up, like that hasn't been bad. Transitioning from story to story has been good. So I tried. I tried to find something that had gone wrong, and I just couldn't. So everything's been solid for me.
All right. Well, apparently I've got the ones that have the issues then.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. Nothing too crazy, but I did have to come in and give it a half star here for
Ooh.
technical performance simply because I did run into a couple small things. So, first off, when I got into the first reactor and hit the scorpion boss, it's a two-part fight essentially. So, you get the initial section on one end of the bridge, and then he jumps over to the other, and then he brings out and he starts hitting you with his tail,
Right.
which is like a huge, devastating attack. And I know that this was a glitch simply because I played the demo. I beat the demo, and in the demo, you fight the scorpion boss, and you get to go through the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
So in the demo, he kept attacking me. The tail attack with the devastation was repeated. I had to constantly get cover. That was probably the hardest part of the fight as you're trying to heal and everything.
Yeah.
But in my game, when it switched over to that part of the fight, the scorpion did the tail attack the very first time, because it kind of shows you like what he's going to do.
Yeah.
And he did that. But then after that, he actually kind of froze
Oh.
and never did anything else after that. And it didn't freeze the game, it just froze him as an enemy. So I was actually able to go in and whoop his ass for the second half of the fight and pretty much just melt his life down until it went into the final battle animation.
Yeah. Wait, so like, yeah, just stood there and took damage?
He just stood there and took the damage. He
Oh,
stopped
dang.
attacking me. So that was one, probably the biggest technical issue I've seen so far. Wasn't complaining.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not gonna complain. A boss freezing mid-fight
Right.
just to take your entire gamut? Yeah, okay.
And especially having played in the demo, so I already got to experience it. I might have been a little bit more bummed out if it happened and this was like the first run through. But anyways, it did still happen, so I had to call it out. And then I have had not quite as crazy of a visual hitching as what you're saying you saw on Twitter, but I have had some occasional visual hitches. Most of mine have been when I'm out around the edges of the map and like the camera spinning. I've just seen here and there occasionally the visuals will kind of go a little wild or not look right and then snap into place. Just some of that hitching you'll see here and there.
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, I haven't seen any of that. It's so
Well,
crazy.
not unfortunately. It's a good thing that you haven't seen.
Well, not unfortunate. Yeah, not unfortunate. Yeah, it's not unfortunate. I'm sitting here. Why isn't my game breaking?
Those were really the two things. So not really game breaking. Definitely more just minor annoyances, if anything. So I did take it down to the half star because of that. I had to nitpick it a little bit. But on the other side, and we kind of mentioned it before, just from a technical performance, definitely awesome not to have to deal with memory cards playing Final Fantasy
Oh my
VII.
god. Right. Yeah. That is nice.
And then the other thing I was thinking about to mention here, and it didn't really impact my rating, but I thought it was kind of a good topic for technical performance while we're here, is being that this is an episodic release and we are in April of 2020, staring down holiday season 2020 with the PS5 coming out,
Right.
and what we're expecting to be at least a year or two development life cycle between each of these episodes. I'm expecting that this is the only one we're going to get on PS4 and that Final Fantasy VII Remake 2 is going to be on the PS5. So it'll just be interesting kind of throwing it out there right as you're playing it. What exactly will be different from PS4 to PS5. How will it perform?
Yeah.
Will the new console actually make it perform worse just because they're making that shift and there's new things to work out with the new console? I don't know. There's a lot to be considered, but it just kind of dawned on me with the timing. Like, we're going to get this first one on PS4, and we're going to get the next one, probably the rest of them on PS5.
When I didn't even think of this until just now, with it's exclusive to PlayStation for a year, but on April 10th, 2021, it's going to get released to Xbox. But at that point, the Xbox Series X will be out. So is it going to go? It's still going to release on the Xbox One?
Absolutely, Kyle, because here's where Microsoft is going to beat PlayStation in the next console war.
Oh.
Because remember, backwards
yeah.
compatibility on the Xbox is going to be for everything that's on Xbox Live. So you get that new Series X, you can still play your 360 games so long as that they're on Xbox Live today. So I would assume that game will drop, and you'll be able to play it on your Xbox One S, your Xbox One X, or your Xbox Series X. Whereas the question with PlayStation is going to be, is Final Fantasy VII Remake 1 going to be part of that 100 exclusive PS4 titles that are only going to be what you get as backwards compatibility on PS5?
God damn it, Sony! That's my reaction to that.
Sorry, you lobbed me a softball because
did.
I am an Xbox guy, so I had to throw that out there.
Yeah.
But it's true.
It's true. You make me so mad, Sony. You make me so mad.
Get ready to rebuy Final Fantasy VII Remake 1 on the PS5 just because you'll want it in the catalog.
Right. Well, it's not like I haven't rebought Final Fantasy VII 10 times already in my lifetime. So in the end, you gave it a half star, and as I didn't find anything, like I said, smooth transitions, I gave technical performance a full 1 star.
So that's good. That's some good trade-offs, you know. That's why we do this. You had some different looks on it from the story perspective. I had some different looks on it from the technical performance, so it definitely is always fun to go through this. Because really what we see, too, in the digital age is no matter what console you're on or downloading the games digitally versus physical, different people just have different issues with these games, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you never know.
All right, we're wrapping up here. The last category, and then we'll take it home, is the GeeK KetchUp special, sauciness.
Sauciness. And of course, this game is going to be just dripping in sauce. Like, it's just so good and so bold. And we've waited too long, and it's just been so good. I mean, there's sauce all over this.
Yeah, dude, I'm totally covered in sauce.
It just is. Yeah, it's a solid, bold, talking KC Masterpiece, good, like KC Masterpiece, probably not the boldest barbecue sauce out there, but they say KC Masterpiece bold barbecue sauce. That's what this is. This is big time, top notch. I want it on my waffles. I want it on my chicken tenders. I want it on my tacos, on my pizza. I want this sauce on everything.
It's true. Yeah, I had it here that sauciness is at an all-time high with this game. We have waited so long for it. We have debated what it would end up looking like for so many hours in our group chats. We've been questioning, what episodic meant for a game like this, all of the above, and I'm telling you, I don't even care about them anymore. It is servicing every fanboy itch that I have, and I am happy with it. I was actually already thinking about the fact that I can't wait to replay this game after I beat it. And I'm not usually one of those kinds of people when it comes to story games. Like, I have to have a break, and then I'll come back and play it again.
Right.
And I think that this game, just like the original, is going to have a good bit of replay value just because of how much we love it. So I went full 1 star on sauciness. How about you?
Oh, full 1 star. There was never a doubt. It was a full 1 star. If I could somehow give it a 1.5 star to make up for the half star on the story, I would. But I'll be fair. But it gets the full star, 100%.
It's true. Well, that actually wraps us up. So let's look at where we ended up with our final review in progress ratings. Where'd you have it at, Kyle?
Well, add it all up with the half star on story, full star on gameplay, technical performance, graphics and sound, and sauciness, it ends at a 4.5.
And I ended up exactly the same, 4.5 out of 5 stars. Really, that only difference being the half star I gave it for technical performance. versus the full star that I gave it for story. So we had a couple little differences, but most of all, we seem to have the same experience, be on the same page. Definitely would recommend it to anybody out there that's a fan of Final Fantasy VII, fan of Final Fantasy in general. Whether you've played it before or not, definitely worth the pickup.
Absolutely, yeah. There's no doubt. Whether, like you said, whether you're familiar with the Final Fantasy franchise, or you're new to it, or new to JRPGs or action RPGs, this one is worth trying out and reliving that story. Because after waiting nearly a decade for the Final Fantasy VII Remake, it has been amazing to get our hands on the game. We can't wait to get back to it and fully immerse ourselves into Midgar.
Thank you for listening to GeeK KetchUp. If you enjoyed today's chapter, please remember to subscribe to GeeK KetchUp on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Check out GeeK KetchUp on Facebook and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at GeeK KetchUp for updates on new episodes every 2 weeks. You can find links to all these accounts in the show notes below or at our website, www.geekketchuppodcast.com. Stay saucy, you nerds.